you very much, Mr. Chairman. And contrary to what Jerry Adams thinks of all of you, ladies and gentlemen, that should cover you all. It didn't cover everyone at a certain conference last week, because Mr. Robinson must have had to start by saying, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, puffed up lemmings and pygmies. And then we'll do it. Trust, ladies and gentlemen, there are no thugs in the house. Think of it, Chairman. The DUP puts and keeps the IRA in government, but it is this traditional unionist that they choose to call a thug. If asking hard questions of a squirming, shifty special advisor, which riles his DUP protectors, makes me a thug, then so be it. I think, however, the treatment meted out by that same special advisor to the courageous councillor Jenny Palmer came far closer to thuggish behaviour. I should, of course, welcome you to North Antrim, the place whose MP has brought a whole new meaning to rent to buy. Instead of using your own money, you use the public's money. Use public money to pay exorbitant rent to a front man, a sidekick, so that the party can pay off a mortgage and acquire an asset debt-free. Dodgy or what? Yeah. And if you are a stamp collector, North Antrim has much to offer. There's a quiet little garage in Cullybacky from which you can hoard thousands of stamps. You might have thought you'd go to a post office for stamps and to a garage for oil, but it seems not. And speaking of oil, seems to have been having very cold winters in Londonderry. Lord hey, off hey ho, it's off to the Lord's we go. Lord Hay has been feeling the cold. Well, now he's feeling the heat. And for Arlie, she gets a little touchy. Please don't annoy her by asking her about the cost of office space and cash. Wonderful. It hasn't been a good week for some, Mr. Chairman, but it's been a very good year for TUV. More people than ever voted traditional unionist voice this year. And I want to thank the party for all the effort that made that possible. And here in North Antrim, it was particularly pleasing to give a certain party a good kick up the backside. Well done, Timothy Gaston and Stuart MacDonald. Well done to all our council candidates. And one of the immediate effects of 76,000 votes for TUV was to give the DUP a creak in their neck. It comes from constantly having to look over their shoulder at the TUV. There are 76,000 reasons why a certain DUP MP who lavished millions on the Irish language when he was culture minister has now been playing to the gallery in his newfound love of yogurt. I want to tell the DUP the creak in your neck is incurable, because this party is not going away. We're on their case, and we'll be staying on their case. The TUV message is resonating more than ever with the voters. Even the First Minister borrowed our script to declare that Stormont is unfit for purpose. Haven't we been saying that for years? But what is Mr. Robinson doing about it? Nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, if you lived in a house that was condemned as unfit, what would you do? You'd get out. What does Mr. Robinson do? He calls in the cowboy builders and the bandits who made it unfit to see how they can patch it up again. Instead of applying the axe to the root of the problem, he orders up the sticking plaster. Make no mistake, that is what the current talks are all about. It's the parties of failure scrambling around to patch up the collapsing edifice before the whole thing comes crashing down on top of the ministerial limos. That's what it's all about. And of course, those talks are carefully constructed to ensure that they exclude anyone who point out such uncomfortable truths. Oh yes, room for the Republic of Ireland's government at the table. Sitting there and receiving every paper submitted, and then there are some pretend they're not negotiating about the internal affairs of Northern Ireland with the Republic. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. And next week, maybe, or shortly thereafter, Mr. Cameron is coming, but who's coming with him? The Taoiseach. That's my only contribution to Irish today. The Taoiseach is coming with him. Here we are, having talks, allegedly, about the internal governance of Northern Ireland. And who's going to come and see how we're getting on? By all means, the United Kingdom Prime Minister. There should be no place for the Prime Minister of a foreign country to supervise internal talks about the internal affairs. There's plenty of room in those talks for the Republic of Ireland's government, but no room for the voice of traditional unionism. On May the 22nd, over 100,000 unionist voters voted for a vision totally at odds with the perpetual failure of Belfast Agreement devolution. That was almost 1/3 of all unionists who voted. Those 100,000, a third of the unionist voters, did not vote for the DUP. They did not vote for the Ulster Unionists. Most of the 100,000 voted for TUV. Yet deliberately and consciously, the representatives of those 100,000 unionists are shut out of these talks. Because, ladies and gentlemen, they're not about righting the wrongs in Stormont. It's about finding a self-serving, face-saving band-aid to keep it together. To keep the gravy train on the tracks. And what a corrupt gravy train it has now been exposed to be. Sinn Féin, not satisfied with the Northern Bank proceeds, has been ripping off the taxpayer by laundering on an industrial scale public money to the tune of millions through bogus cultural societies and a bogus research company. Francie Malloy and culture in the same sentence. That's enough to alert you that everything is not as it seems. If ever, Mr. Chairman, there was a need for a rigorous, relentless police investigation, this is it. But once more, will truth and justice be sacrificed on the altar of protecting the process? Probably. Because in the new Northern Ireland, because of the corruption of the Belfast Agreement, protecting the process trumps every time truth and justice. Seen it with the innocent victims, whose needs, whose plaintiff cries, since the Belfast Agreement have been shamefully trumped by protecting the process. And now we have this exposed scandal. But will it even be discussed? I have an urgent oral question down for Monday to the Assembly Commission. I want to ask them, why did it take a TV programme to expose that for which you're responsible? But will I even be allowed to ask it? Will I even be allowed to ask that question? I suspect not. Because you can't upset the process. Think of it. Think of what happened when the Westminster expenses scandal erupted. The House of Commons was in uproar. But take Stormont, where we have this industrial scale of the abuse of public money, and probably Monday will come and go, with not even a cheep allowed to be said about it. Cover up seems to be the order of the day. And how is Belfast Agreement devolution working out, ladies and gentlemen? It's an unmitigated disaster. Log-jammed on everything, delivering nothing, and lurching from one crisis to the next. And yet there are some who foolishly clamour to give this useless, failing Stormont even more powers. And believe it or not, even fiscal powers. No one in their right mind should wish tax-raising powers on Stormont, be it corporation tax or any other collective tax. Simple, indisputable truth is They can't handle the powers they've got. The loonies really would have taken over the asylum if we gave tax-raising powers to Stormont. Think of the mint-chewing, expense-swilling economic nincompoops consetting your taxes. The mind really boggles. Because this example in Stormont has become a byword for chaos, for waste, for inaction. Here in this constituency, as elsewhere, we're facing the closure of hospitals and a vital drug addiction unit, while Stormont itself is a veritable waste machine. £5 million a year on spin doctors. £50,000 a week on whining and dining. £2 million on special advisors. Twice what they pay in Scotland, 4 times what special advisors cost in Wales. And over £150 million in the term of this Assembly on the useless, non-productive north-south bodies. Because largely it's all a great vanity project, £400,000 in their own photographers to take photos of the ministers wherever they go, whatever they say, whatever they do. Private photographers paid by you. And £16.5 million a year spent on 367 staff in the office of the joint ministers. More than twice the staff of the Prime Minister. 36 of them. 36 of them. Their own private spin doctors. And with all that, they still can't con the public. And wait for it. 124 staff in the Equality and Strategy Unit. Strategy? What strategy? As for equality, ask Asher's Bakery. Ask Asher's Bakery about where OFM, DFM equality strategy lands you. It lands you in court for daring to exercise your freedom of conscience. And who funds the thought police that is the Equality Commission? Peter and Marty, of course. It is their budget. It is their budget which sustains the Equality Commission to persecute those who dare to have principles. Ashers are being dragged through the courts on funds supplied by OFM DFM. Yeah. And then the DUP, at their comfort, tell us how much better things are under Sinn Féin DUP misrule. Lament the plight of Ashers, but fund their persecutors. And of course, this week, when Jerry's mask slipped, see, the problem with Jerry's mask is it's got very loose because it's been overused. And now Jerry's mask has a tendency to slip. And my oh my did it slip in Enniskillen. Because we got a telling revelation of the real purpose of the so-called equality agenda. Something much more significant than him calling us all bees was his illuminating admission that equality is the Trojan horse of the entire Republican strategy. Let me repeat that, ladies and gentlemen. I want every unionist to get that burned into their soul. Sinn Féin view is that equality is the Trojan horse of the entire Republican strategy. Gerry Adams, not noted for his truthfulness, never spoke truer words than those. Good job it was recorded, Mr. Chairman, because Gerry might have even denied he was ever in Innisfrin. Equality is the Trojan horse of the entire Republican agenda, operating right under the nose of the TUV, because it is OFM, DFM that has responsibility for equality in this land. How has that provo perversion of equality manifested itself? Not too hard to see it. The RUC disbanded in the name of equality. You had to have a police force equally acceptable to all, including those who bombed and butchered and murdered them. So in the name of equality, the RUC had to go. Orange marches blocked in the name of equality because you had to show equal respect for the rights of those who always wanted to put themselves in the way of being offended. So in that, orange marches in the name of equality had to be blocked. The Union flag torn down from her prime civic building in the name of equality, because you had to show equality for other traditions. Never mind the fact that the Union flag symbolises the predominant will of the greater number in this country. But in that perverse, corrupted view of equality, you had to tear down the Union flag. Of course, we got a more personal insight into how the provo view of equality operates with Mary Cahill. And the rights of the victim were trumped by protecting the victim maker. That's the nature, the quality of equality that Sinn Féin espouses. And even our democratic structures have had to be subverted by this Republican agenda of perversion of equality. So that the fundamental democratic right, sorry Mr. Chairman, you're going to hear it again, the fundamental democratic right to change your government, to ever vote a party out of government, and to even have an opposition, are all dispensed with in Northern Ireland in the perverse name of equality. On the basis that it is said, oh, you must treat all mandates equally, therefore you must put all in government. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, there is no such thing as a mandate to be in government as of right. Doesn't exist. So yes, Mr. Chairman, we see, we know, we live under the jackboot of provo equality. Never forget the basic reality that the IRA, Sinn Féin's IRA, did their utmost to destroy Northern Ireland through their decades of terrorism. From that, let me make a very simple observation. Sinn Féin are not in government. They're not in Stormont to give you good government. No. For them, it is another Trojan horse. They're not there to make Northern Ireland succeed. No, for them, it's a golden opportunity to fulfill their own prophecy that Northern Ireland is a failed political entity. Hence their enthusiasm to bankrupt it, as we've graphically seen in recent weeks over their approach to budgetary matters. And their fifth column use of power to peddle their pernicious, perverted equality agenda. Be it in education or anything else, that agenda is being peddled because they're in government. I was thinking about the Greek mythology of the Trojan horse. When the Greeks were attacking Troy, and they'd been attacking Troy, it is said, for 10 years, and the city was withstanding them, they come up with this idea: they would appear to have disappeared, but they would forget a large wooden horse. They would pretend to decommission, maybe, you could say. They would pretend that they'd gone away, you know. They left the large wooden horse full of soldiers concealed inside it. Citizens of Troy brought it inside the gates, fascinated by it. And then at night, the soldiers who were inside the horse came out, opened the city gates, and brought the enemy in. That's what a Trojan horse is. A trick to perfect destruction of those they want to destroy. The only compelling distinction with the Trojan horse analogy is that it was Unionists who opened the gates. Sadly, it was the IRA, Sinn Féin, were brought into government, no matter how much Dublin, London, Washington wanted it, they were brought into government by Ian Paisley opening the door and bringing it in. And so, when we think of the Trojan horse, and we think of those words of equality being the Trojan horse of the entire Republican strategy, we see it before our very eyes. Mr. Chairman, whoever else might be cozying up to Sinn Féin in government and sustaining them there day and daily, I'm proud of the fact that this party, often alone, refuses to bow the knee to their tyranny. Some in the DUP tell us they don't like power sharing. They just like the power. Ours, Mr. Chairman, is no phony election-timed battle with Sinn Féin. TUV stands immovably against the Sinn Féin strategy. All of it, all day, every day, and against, very important, the structures that empower them to deliver their pernicious agenda. And it is those structures that must change if Northern Ireland is ever to have durable and workable devolution. Mandatory coalition is the very antithesis of democracy. There can, I say again, be no places as of right for anyone in government. Now the reality is this: no party in Northern Ireland is big enough to form a government on its own. They're going to inevitably have to be a coalition. But it must be a coalition of the willing. Those who can agree what they're going to do about welfare reform, about the economy, about health, about education, and who together can command the requisite majority in the Assembly. Whoever they are, they form the government. Those who can't agree, whoever they are, they form the opposition. That's how durable, workable coalitions are attained anywhere across the world. And if you need the added protection of an attainable weighted majority in some key issues like budget, programme for government, then this party's open to discuss that. But we're not open to discuss a contrived, contorted, perverted system of government gives anyone a place as of right in government. So mandatory coalition for TUV is out. Robbing the voters of the right to change their government is out. Denying even the basic right to an opposition is out. For us, it's about attaining workable devolution, not the dogma of inevitable failure so evident in mandatory coalition. I want to say this: whether this Stormont executive implodes this year or next year, implode it will, because it defies in its very structures and ethos the basic rules and tenets of democracy. And you don't have to be agreed about anything in order to be in government. No surprise that when they are in government, they can't and won't agree about anything. That is why, once you put a mandatory coalition in place and give everyone the right of a guaranteed place in government, that's why the inevitable result is governmental discord, paralysis, and logjam. It's as unavoidable as night follows day. The only thing that's presently holding it together, the only glue that's holding it together, is the semblance of some power that they all love to have. But one day, even that glue will dry out, and it will give way to the inevitable collapse of a system that can never have democratic accountability or credibility. And of course, it is TUV's mission to hasten that day, to put it out of its misery, and the sooner the better, as far as this miserable failing executive is. This year, we had 76,000 voters sharing our vision. Ladies and gentlemen, give me 76,000 TUV voters and more in the next Assembly election, and I guarantee you Stormont will never be the same again. You've seen what one determined TUV voice can do in Stormont. The upset we can cause to the pernicious apple cart. You've seen the spotlight we've been able to shine into dark corners. Think what we could do if my hand was strengthened by multiple representation in that Assembly. Then, ladies and gentlemen, it'll be time to stand back and watch the edifice of misgovernment crumble and fall. That is both the challenge and the opportunity. I'm up for it. I trust you are. It needs to be done. And with your help, and with that of every convinced Democrat determined to rid us of the failures of this pitiful Stormont. It can, it will be done. Thank you very much.